Hi, ladies. This is Sherry Lutz Harrington with the group Women Surviving Financial Abuse and, of course, Strong Women Thriving. And I'm super excited today to do this interview with our guest, Allison Dagney. And I'm going to explain why she doesn't have her video on, or ask her to in a minute. But first, I want to introduce her. So Allison is an emotional abuse recovery coach. Just take a minute, let that sink in. She's the author of the memoir, When Tears Leave Scars. It's going to be backwards on my video, but we'll show that in the pictures too. And a survivor of 20 years of covert narcissistic abuse. She's also the mother of 3. Her goal is to expand awareness of this rampant type of abuse, narcissistic abuse, and help others to be emotionally empowered and find inner peace along their healing journeys. Ultimately, Allison wishes to help victims gain the needed strength to escape and survivors the tools to heal, all while helping outsiders gain a better understanding of hidden abuse. So Allison, that's a lot. That's a big goal. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for joining me today. And thank you to Christine Lucan of Money is Emotional, who introduced us. So
yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule and 3 kids and everything this time of year. So first, can you explain to the audience why you've asked us not to show your face during the interview? I think this is an interesting piece of your healing journey, that other women could benefit from hearing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I never really had sought out to become a coach or anything like that when I first escaped my emotionally abusive marriage. And I had the idea at the beginning when I first found out what was happening to me, when I first figured out that I was being emotionally abused, because I didn't know what narcissistic abuse was. I didn't know emotional abuse really existed. I didn't know any of that. And I literally thought in my brain, this is crazy. Like, there has to be so many other people out there who are experiencing the same thing and have no idea. I have to write a book about this. And that was my decision. I have to write a book. Well, when I decided to do that, I knew logically there could be backlash if I shared my true story. And I had, I think, a rational and legitimate fear that my abuser, if found out, would sue me and take me to court over slander, libel, whatever, something of a written work. So I did a lot of research and I did a lot of investigating, and I asked attorneys and had them read my book and decided to use a different name. I have opted not to show my face on social media or anywhere online because I need to protect myself and my children. Now, do I believe that my abuser could beat me in court if I were to be sued? No, I don't, because I've checked every single box and I've done all my due diligence up front. But I don't want to leave any room for the opportunity for them to drag me to court, waste my resources, my time, my money, and all that stuff fighting it. Right. So I got to protect me. I got to protect my children. They're still all under 18. So once they're over 18, it won't be quite as important for me to keep myself under this cloak. However, right now it is very important. And so that's why I do appreciate you allowing me to be here with just my voice.
I respect that. And, I wanted you to share that with the audience because I think that there's this feeling of being a victim. You feel scared all the time.
Yeah.
And I think what you're showing us is there's ways to be brave and set a really strong boundary. Like, I'm going to do what I want to do in my life, and I'm not going to let his threats keep me from doing it. I'm just going to do it in a way that feels safe. And so I just think it's an incredible choice. And I applaud you for being brave enough to write your story and share your story. So before we dive into your story, I did want to just mention the kind of the certifications that you have, and if you could kind of explain those to us in brief. So I understand you have a certified rapid reprogramming coach certificate through the Thought Work Institute, and you're also a certified trauma-informed coach through the Center for Healing. Can you
Yes.
explain those to us a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. So the trauma informed certification was really important to me because I work with a lot of people who've experienced deep trauma. And I know there's a lot of people out there, a lot of coaches who might work with people who have trauma. And it is so important to understand the nervous system. It is so important to understand when people are dysregulated and how to get them in a state where they can be relaxed to be able to heal. And if you are not trauma informed, I'm not saying you can't help people, but for me, it was really important because I've experienced trauma. A lot of my clients have experienced trauma, and I felt like that having that certification would only help me help others better. So I did that on my own through the Center for Healing. Anybody can actually go get that certification through them, and it's free. So, and it's an amazing course. But it is so helpful. One, it even helped me learn a lot of things about myself, but to be able to support my clients in a much deeper way. Now, the rapid reprogramming certification that is my focus on how I help people. So when you introduced me and my emotional abuse recovery coach, that's who I am and that's what I do. What I do, that certification helps me help people from a subconscious level. So that basically what that means is we're getting to the root source of why anybody feels the way they feel, why anybody has a behavior that they have. And we get to that root source so that you can have lasting results, so that you're not just coping, so that you're not just band-aiding your emotions and distracting yourself and trying all these things that actually never work long term. So that to me was so critical because I found this tool on a podcast. I was listening to a podcast. I found this tool. I started implementing it based on what this instructor said to do on each episode. I listened to like 100 episodes twice through, and it was amazing. And I was like, this is fantastic. Like I was
Right, right.
getting results just from
Mhm.
doing this work on a podcast. Like it was phenomenal. So I
Right,
contacted the person who was teaching it, and she said, "Oh, well, I certify people. I certify coaches." And I was like, "Sign me up." Because now I
right.
can help people. So as I said before, this wasn't something that I ever sought out to do, but because it
Sure.
helped me so much after spending 4.5 years in therapy and not getting the results, right? It was
Yeah,
like, this is a game changer. And I know
right.
that people need this. So that's why I became certified in rapid reprogramming to help people get quick results after this kind of trauma.
Well, thank you. That's incredible work that you're doing, and I honor and respect that so much. Having been through not just abusive trauma, but other trauma in my life, I understand the importance of addressing that piece of it.
Yeah.
And I think the rapid reprogramming, from what I understand of it, sounds like it really, instead of treating the symptoms like traditional cognitive behavioral therapy sort of does,
Yep.
is it kind of goes back to the root and pulls out the root of the weed, if you will, and says, okay, this is the real root cause. Whether it's something we remember or don't remember, it's there, and it causes us to keep repeating patterns and keep doing things that are unhealthy. And I think any woman coming out of an abusive relationship really needs to consider some serious work of some kind.
Yep.
And this seems like a really excellent choice for some people. So I'm happy that you're doing that and you found such
Thank you.
results from it too. That's fantastic.
Yeah,
So
and you're spot on about that. Like what you said, like treating the symptom versus actually treating the problem. And so it just would be like, if you had a headache and you had taken Tylenol for that headache every day, but the real problem is that you have dehydration and you need to drink water, right?
right.
Let's give you some water so that you can eliminate the pain, right? And so that's basically what it is.
Well, I love hearing about new modalities and new different techniques, because I've found in my journeys through various types of therapies, different things work for different people, and different things work at different times in your life too. And different traumas or different situations might need a different kind of an approach. You know what I mean? Like
Absolutely.
there's
Absolutely.
there's so many out there, but
Yep.
excuse me, this is one I was not familiar with, so I'm happy to hear about, because I think it's a great one. And if anyone in our audience is thought about some kind of coaching or trauma work, I think it might be really worth exploring. Okay, so we'll circle back a little bit more on your work later. Right now, I want to talk about your experience. And I know that your focus is the narcissistic abuse and the emotional abuse. What I see when I read your story, and I've heard you talk, is there's also quite a bit of financial abuse that went on. So, of course, being a financial abuse recovery platform, that's kind of where I'm going to pull the thread a little bit as we go through this conversation. But just to kind of briefly recap from what I've read in your book, you married young, and your book is the story. It's called When Tears Leave Scars. And just so you know, I have read it, and wow, what a compelling story. It's just like my heart just goes out to you. I mean, I endured emotional abuse in my marriage, but it was nothing to the level of what you endured. So I'd like the audience to hear how being emotionally abused by a narcissist is survivable, and how financial abuse is likely part of that experience of living with an emotionally abusive narcissistic. And kind of how I want to do that is I have different pieces of your book that I've pulled out, and I want to kind of ask you to respond to some of this. So this first quote, I really kind of caught my eye, because you think about the beginning of a relationship, and how do we smart, intelligent, accomplished women end up in these abusive relationships? And you say, I moved right over the multitude of red flags lining my path to the church. I wasn't in love with Nick. I was in love with the future that Nick sold me. I looked at him with hopes of what he could become, when I should have looked at him for what he really was. So what would you suggest to a woman on how to avoid getting into an abusive relationship, especially if she's already been through an abusive one?
Right. Yeah, that's a really great question. And thank you for sharing that excerpt. The red flags is the big thing here. And the thing with me is, somewhere inside of me at that time, even though I didn't know what narcissism was, even that I didn't even know red flags were, I didn't know even the term. I knew was I was actually in love with his potential, what I thought he could be, what I thought we could be, right? I was in love with something else. The dream that he sold me, the things that I believed were possible for us and for me and for our life together, right? And so I knew that I wasn't actually in love with him. I knew I was in love with this other thing, this imagination, or this dream or fantasy, right? So I think for people who want to avoid it, it's getting real. You got to get real with yourself. You got to be like, do I really love this person for who they are, for what they do, for how they show themselves to me? Or am I in love with what I think they could be? Am I in love with what I think they are going to be?
Right. I think there's that being in love with love. And I think I did the same thing. I think I overlooked all the red flags because I so desperately wanted to be married and have kids.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was huge for me too. And even as a little girl, I can remember the fairy tales and oh, I'm just going to ride off in the white horse with this man of my dreams. And when I met him, I was like, I got my man of my dreams. I got my white horse. I'm going to ride off into the sunset. Bye, everybody. Right. That's what I thought.
Right.
And it was just not true. I was just in love with this idea. And I wasn't real with me. I wasn't actually looking at his behavior. I wasn't actually looking at the things that he was showing me. I wasn't believing it. I was pushing it aside and saying, no, I don't believe any of that. I believe what I want to believe. I believe what I want to happen is going to happen.
Right. I see that too. And I think I did the same thing. The other thing I would say to counter that a little bit is narcissists are great at hooking you.
Oh, yeah.
So don't beat yourself up too much. Yeah. I go back and oh yeah, there were other things in play. It wasn't entirely 100%. My decision that I go and marry this person that I probably shouldn't have in a lot of ways, but you have to also go, okay, but I got my children out of this relationship and I've learned and I've grown and this is my journey in life. And now here we are trying to pass that forward and pay it forward, which I think is about all you can do when you've gone through something like this, is try to help someone
Yeah.
else get out of it or help someone else prevent it from happening again. And I think that your words are really wise on that. Listen to your intuition, I think,
Yeah.
is a lot of it too, and listen to, what's behind the facade or the front level.
Exactly. And you said it right too. It's, this is the love bombing, right? I was love bombed. I talk about it in my book. He took me on dates. He was buying me things. He was buying me presents on his birthday, right? He
Yeah.
was doing all the wonderful things for me that I'd never had done before. And so I'm feeling like really special. And this person really cares about me. And this person really loves me. And like, that's what you're saying, right? They're very crafty. They're very cunning. They're very good at putting on a facade. So yeah, you can't beat yourself up completely, but if you want to avoid it, you got to pay attention to the reality. And you also have to be aware of love bombing as well.
Right.
Yeah.
There are signs. You just have to
Yeah.
learn what they are and pay attention to them. And I would hope second time around, all of us would be smarter, but I know it's
100%.
also a healthy reminder to hear it from someone who, has this background and can say, this is what I see now that I didn't see then. Right. So that's perfect. So looking into kind of diving into a little bit of the financial abuse, you tell the story in your book about how you learned not to order a meal that costs more than whatever your husband ordered. And I've never heard of this example of financial abuse, but I would definitely classify it as such because it's control over spending, right? It's control and manipulation. He also did this with your kids. You said insisting they just get a burger, not a Happy Meal, because of the cost difference. And just to make this clear to our audience, you were not in a financially tight situation. Your husband made good money, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So what would happen if you ordered something more expensive than he did?
Usually it was the immediate guilt trips. It was, and he would say often a lot to me, you're going to make me, how did he phrase it? You're going to make me have to retire later.
Okay.
Just by me ordering a meal that cost a few dollars more, he would guilt trip me that he's going to have to work harder and he's going to have to retire later because I am not considerate of the things that I'm purchasing. So I got really good at identifying areas where I could avoid feeling that way, avoid the guilt trips, avoid all of that, because, that was sort of his go-to thing, was to tell me that I was inconsiderate, I was a bad person, I didn't care about him and the work that he was doing and how hard that he was working. So instead of, ordering the thing that was going to be more expensive on the meal, wherever we were at, I would just go ahead and order the exact same thing he did. I'd wait for him to order and I'd order the same price item or the exact same item, because then I didn't have to worry about it.
Because he couldn't call you out if he was doing it, but he would do whatever he wanted, apparently.
Right. Yeah, it was just an adaptation that I used in order to keep that from happening.
Yeah. Okay, so this brings us into this next piece, which I want to address, which the following sections of your book really exemplify to me when your marriage changed from equitable and balanced to financially abusive. So I'm going to read another section. Nick suggested I stay home from work because his job could afford us the luxury of me being a full-time mom. It was a sad but exciting time for me. I would be able to stay home with my beloved daughter and see all of her first and raise her myself. I would miss my coworkers and the sense of accomplishment one gets from hard work and earning a paycheck. What I never anticipated was missing my independence. I was no longer contributing to the bank account. I was no longer making my decisions regarding our finances. Suddenly, I felt as if I were spending Nick's money, not our money. My purchases required his permission, and he analyzed my receipts to ensure I wasn't overspending. My questions about money were dismissed because he said I wouldn't understand. I didn't feel like his partner. I felt like his child. It was evident he didn't trust me to responsibly spend, and he didn't think I was intelligent enough to understand the complexities of investing. Over time, I began to believe these lies, which results in Nick gaining more power over me. The immense pressure to obey his financial orders kept me in a position of submission. He made the money, he earned the paycheck. The microscope on my credit cards and receipts were enough to start a vicious cycle of anxiety that would be deeply ingrained in me for years. If turning back the clock were an option, I would have held on to my professional independence for as long as possible, even if it meant working part-time. So talk to me based on all of that and looking backwards, of course, hindsight, talk to me about how you would recommend women handle the dilemma of motherhood and career.
Oh gosh. Well, that is such a great question. Because, I really did want to be a mom, and I would never tell someone not to be a stay-home mom. I would never say, don't give up your career, or, like, you got to make the decision based on what you feel like is right for you. But I knew, here's the thing, I knew that that was wrong for me. I
There you
knew
go. Mm-hmm.
I knew, and I allowed myself to be coerced. And the coercion wasn't just from him, it was from the entire family, because his mother was a stay-home mom ever since she had all of her kids. All the sister-in-laws were also stay-home moms, right? So then here I come with my first child, and it was like this expectation. Like, and not only that, but there was a lot of guilt about it as well. Like, why would you ever want someone else to raise your child, right?
Yeah.
When you can stay home, like, you're a horrible person for wanting that, right? And it wasn't like I wanted somebody else to raise my child, but I knew I was really good at my job. I was really successful. I was climbing the ranks, right? And I had other coworkers who were working part-time, who were doing the same thing that I was doing. So it was like, well, wait a second. They would have with open arms accepted me as a part-time employee in my job and said, yeah,
Right.
you can work part-time. We'd love to have you. You can work from home a couple of days a week or whatever. They would have totally been on board with that. So, I really can't obviously tell someone how they should do that. But I think the most important thing would be is, do you feel like when you're in the relationship with the person who would be in basically like the breadwinner, is
Mm-hmm.
that person, do they show you that you are just as equal of a partner when it comes to financial decisions, when it comes to understanding where you're putting your money, when it comes to the bank accounts, right? Are you already part of the decision? Are you already on the bank accounts? Are they willing to have conversations with you about where you're going to invest your money? And do you want to, put it in the stock market, or do you want to put it in a 401k? Like, do they even include you? Right?
Right.
Because my
Mm-hmm.
ex was saying things to me, like, even before I became a stay-home mom, like, you won't understand this. It's too difficult. You're not really that good at math. Right? So it is the
I
person
hate
that
that.
is supposed to be your partner. Are
Right.
they including you? Are they,
Right.
because if all of a sudden you're a stay-home parent and you don't have any money that's coming in for yourself, are you feeling secure that that person is going to include you? Are they going to make you an equal or not? And I think that's the thing that you have to really look at.
Yeah, that's really well said. Thank you. And I just go to that. Don't worry your pretty little head phrase
Right.
that we used to hear. It's like, I hate that. I hate that
Yes.
more than anything.
Yes.
Having been a full-time stay-at-home mom, having been a part-time working mom, having been a single full-time working mom, I've kind of seen it from all sides. And I'm with you. I would say hold on to a part-time position if you can, even if it is fairly equitable in the relationship, so that when these kids are a little bit older, you have something to go back to, that you haven't lost your skill set. And also, I know, like, one of my staff members has 3 children, and she went out on maternity leave, and she really wanted to come back, and it was a little more than she thought, but we've scaled it back because she's like, I need something for me. And it's not about the money so much as just keeping her identity separate from just being a mom, which there's nothing wrong with that,
Right.
especially with 3 children, or more, whatever, right? Any number, I guess. But the reality is that if you are in a situation where you're being disrespected and you're being coerced into doing something against your better judgment, that's a red flag, is it not?
Yeah, I 100% agree. I 100% agree. And like you said, it, it's not going to harm you in any way to have a backup. It's
Right.
not, right? Like even if that means, you volunteer somewhere, right, to keep
Right.
up your skills, or that you are doing continuing education of some sort,
Yeah.
or you're dabbling in some sort of side hustle or something like that, right? Like at least, because I've seen so many women who are absolutely unable to get out of an emotionally abusive relationship because they don't have money and they don't have access to the bank
Exactly.
accounts. They don't even have a credit card in their name. They have,
Right.
or their credit is destroyed or
Yeah.
whatever, right?
Right.
So
Well, that financial abuse can go really deep, and it
yeah,
can keep you from earning your own income, having your own, you know, strengths, having something to not just to fall back on, but to enjoy and to contribute or to stock away as your own. If it's a healthy marriage and the man is the agreement, whatever the agreement is within the marriage, he makes the money that supports the family, but you work part-time and save that money on your own. There's
correct.
lots of ways I've seen
Lots of
this
ways.
done. So
Yeah.
yeah, I kind of agree with you. Is like, listen to your intuition. If you are career driven and you want to stay on that path, find a way. But part of what happened to you, it wasn't just a narcissistic marriage. You were sort of into this entire culture that
Hmm.
was supporting him,
Yeah.
and you kind of had to go along to get along. And it was probably what made it super hard to break free. Mine wasn't so much that. Mine was just my husband doing things that were really nasty. Okay, so that's really good. I appreciate that. So then at some point, the narcissism really started to affect you, right? You were physically and emotionally starting to fall apart, and you kept suggesting therapy, and he kept turning it on you, basically gaslighting you and making you question your own sanity and saying, if you don't feel right, you go to therapy. You even had a friend suggest that your husband fit the profile of a psychopath,
Yeah.
and yet you blamed yourself. And it sounds like in the book that even the professionals you went to really didn't see what was going on. So, what would you suggest for a woman if she feels trapped? Like, nobody's hearing me. I don't know what's wrong. I feel like I'm going crazy. What would you suggest?
Yeah, that's a really gosh, that's really deep because I remember being so confused. I remember blaming myself so much.
Mhm.
And it's so hard when you are, gosh, you get me emotional here. It's so hard when you are trying so desperately, right? You're trying so hard to keep the marriage together and like fix yourself. Like there's something
Mhm.
wrong with you. Like
Mhm.
they make you believe you're the problem. And,
Mhm.
you
I'm
know,
laughing because I'm
I
just like
know,
reliving my own
I
experience. So
know.
sorry to interrupt, but please
No,
keep going.
I guess the thing that I would say is when you are thinking about there being something wrong with you, or someone is telling you that you're the problem, you have to logically assess this from like pull back from a third party perspective, right? Does it really make sense that only one person could be the problem in a two-party relationship? Does that really make sense? And
Yeah.
have I ever been told I was crazy before I was in this relationship with this person? Right? You've really got to, it's hard to do this. I'm not trying to suggest that this is easy. It's hard to do this because you're so confused. You're in a fog, right? And I will tell you this, when I was, and it's in my book too, when I was going to therapists and calling them up because he would say, you need therapy, you need to talk to somebody, I was just repeating the stuff he was telling me. I was just saying, I'm crazy. I'm the problem. I'm too emotional. I can't keep my shit together, right? Like that's the stuff I was telling these professionals. So a very, very, very astute professional could probably say, wait a second,
Right.
that doesn't make sense, right?
Where's
So
the
the,
other person in this relationship?
right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
maybe get a second opinion, right? If
Mhm.
that person, if
Mhm.
that therapist is agreeing with you and saying, yeah, here's how we need to help you, right? And you have to remember these are money machines, and these people are, trying to make a dollar and all that stuff too. And the sicker you are, the longer you're going to keep coming back, right?
Right. Right.
So if they tell you that maybe your ex is the problem, then maybe you don't need to keep coming back. So
Yeah.
you might first you need support, right? So if you're not getting support from a therapist, or go check with your doctor. Go talk to somebody on social media, right? I didn't even know I was being abused until someone on social media said to me, I these are the signs of a psychopath. These are the signs of a narcissist, right? You need
Mhm.
to look at this and you need to investigate it.
Yeah. I didn't realize I was being abused till after either,
Yeah.
interestingly enough. And
Yeah.
now it's clear as day, right? Clear as
Yeah.
day. Interesting you say that, because what happened to me, I think I've told my audience this story, but I haven't shared it with you, is that one day my husband and I were in therapy, and we got into, I brought something to him, like the therapist said, bring it up, talk about it. And I did that. And of course, he flipped it on me. And I was like, by the time the conversation was over, I felt like the crazy one. And I
Mm.
went to see a friend that night. I'm like, I don't understand, but he flipped it on me and I feel crazy. I feel like he's a sociopath or something. And she goes, yeah, I know what you mean. And I'm like, I don't even know what a sociopath is. I went home that night and Googled it, and he had like 6 out of 10 of the traits.
Yeah.
So then I called the therapist and I said, I need to see you alone. This
Yeah.
is, we're talking about everything in therapy, but this huge white elephant in the middle of the room. And from there, I'm not going to say it for same reasons you're not going to, it's going to be in my book too. But, there was just this aha moment. And I had 4 different professionals confirm what I now believe to be the mental illness that he struggles with, which is not sociopath. It's a different one.
Oh,
But when I looked that one up, he had 10 out of 11 of the traits.
wow.
Yeah. And it was that, oh my gosh, I can't fix this.
Mm.
That was the moment that things turned for me, when I realized I may have my issues, but I'm willing to work on them.
Mhm.
This is the kind of situation where the other person really can't see it in themselves, and narcissism is a big one,
Yeah.
that they don't realize that they're not normal. They think everybody else is not normal and that they're normal,
Right.
right?
Yes, that was the same experience that I had when I knew because I looked up like the 20 traits of a sociopath or psychopath or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I was my mom. I remember like so clearly, like feeling like my brain was exploding. I couldn't even see straight. I was like, I can't believe this is happening to me, and this is real, and this is reality. And that means I got to get the heck out of here, because I can't live with a person like this.
Exactly, exactly. And that's exactly where I'm going with the next section. You said the only real solution for me was divorce him, but I had to do it. If I stayed, I would suffer the death and loss of my soul. And you know what? I remember saying almost that exact same thing to my in-laws, no less. Mine were not like yours. A couple years before I left my husband, I said, I feel like he's sucking my soul. And their response was, you do whatever you need to do. So emotional abuse does this to you. Wouldn't you agree? And how do you suggest women come back from living with emotional and financial abuse?
Yeah, I 100% agree. It is this sort of soul-sucking situation, and you are losing yourself. Like, you are losing your identity based on all the things that they're telling you about yourself. They're programming you, they're conditioning you to believe all these, false narratives about who you are and who you think they are and what reality is, and people are out to get you, and that's why they isolate you. There's so many complexities as part of this.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're talking about recovering from this kind of thing, right? Because you said before, I don't remember exactly what you said, but like that it's survivable, right? That
It
narcissistic
is.
survivable. And not only that, but I think it is, you can thrive after this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't
Mm-hmm.
have to, a lot of people think that when you've experienced financial abuse, and for me, it was tough because I had all these kind of lingering things, like I can't spend money, or like I'm going to live under a bridge, or like all these, unrealistic sort of thoughts that were kind of that I was ruminating over, was impacting me in a lot of negative ways. And then again, then the emotional abuse part, which was so many other things too, which was,
Right,
low
right.
self-worth and, gaslighting myself and like all these other kind of complexities. But I think it's so important for people to know that healing from this doesn't have to take years. It doesn't have to take the rest of your life. Like I've even heard, maybe you've heard this, like people will say, oh, it takes 1 year to heal for every 2 years of abuse, or like just weird things
Yeah.
like that people
Yeah.
say.
Those, like, how do they
And
come up with these
it's
numbers?
like,
I don't
where did
know.
you,
Yeah.
yeah. And then some people say, oh, it just takes a long time. It just takes so long to heal. And I don't like the word hate, but I really don't like these kinds of narratives because they're
Mhm.
just not true. There are things that keep you stuck, right?
Right.
When you
Right.
actually take action
Hmm.
towards how you want to be feeling, towards how you want to be behaving in your life, in the relationships that you're in, and the communities that you live in, you can actually thrive, but you have to get to the root. You have to get to the
Right.
source of this. And you can't expect that other person who hurt you to be the thing that helps you heal. They're not necessarily going to give you closure. They're not
Right.
necessarily going to
Right.
apologize. They're not necessarily going to do what you need in order so that you can feel better. You have to take
Right.
a responsibility for how you feel and accountability for how you act, right? Even
Mhm.
though someone else did that to you, even though, it would be the same if somebody came up to you and cut your arm, right? And you have this cut now. What do? You immediately go to the cut. You immediately go to the hospital. You get stitches, you get fixed, right? You're not going to that other person saying, "Fix me,
Right.
fix my
Right.
arm." Right? You
Hmm.
have to do that for yourself. So, some people might not want to hear that, but that is truly that is
Right.
truly like the way out of feeling stuck, having
Hmm.
these ruminating thoughts or these behaviors or these unwanted emotions like anxiety and fear and guilt and regret, like all these nasty types of things that we carry. You can
Right.
release that stuff, but you've got to take action for yourself.
Right. Well, two comments on that. That was really well said. Thank you. But two
Yeah.
comments are, one, I think we all need to learn to own our part and to
Mhm.
stop playing the victim.
Mm,
Because I think it's really easy once you've been victimized to hang on to that and it becomes your identity. And
yep.
I think that I try very gently to call people out because I don't think you can recover if you're still in that poor, poor, pitiful me mode and you're asking for handouts and you're asking, you know, you're hooking on to new guys that do the same thing. I think that's what you're saying is you've got to do the work. You've
Yeah.
got to do your own work. Nobody else can do it. The other comment I would make is forgiveness. You
Yeah.
know, for me, a big piece of it was when I identified what I believe is a mental illness in my ex-husband, then I could sort of begin to forgive him because he didn't ask for that. He didn't, he didn't go, oh, give me a mental illness so I can treat everybody around me like shit,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And I see he's still doing it. I talk to my mother-in-law all the time, and it's just sad. And I have to feel that way for him. I loved this man. I cared about him. I had a child with him. And if I can forgive and see it as his journey and his trials and not feel guilty for being the one that left because he was sucking my soul and I
Right.
had to take care of myself. And I
Right.
think those would be my two follow-up comments on that.
Yeah, and I think, I'd love to touch on what you said about forgiveness because a lot of people struggle with that. And I see it on social media all the time, like you don't need to forgive, blah blah blah, never forget. Right? There's a lot of
Mm,
um, people who want to hold on to non-forgiveness, and
right.
I don't believe you are forgiving for the other person. And I think what you make forgiveness mean is so much more important than forgiveness itself. And the reason why I believe that is because if I make forgiveness mean that they get away with it, if I forgive them, then that means what happened didn't matter, right? If you're
It's
holding
not
on to
about
those,
that.
right?
Yeah.
If you're holding on to those things, of course you're going to resist it. But forgiveness is about
Mhm.
you. It's
Right.
allowing yourself to heal and move on from something, right? It doesn't
Right.
mean that what happened didn't matter,
Right.
right?
Or it
That's
didn't
not what it is.
happen. It
Well,
certainly did happen. Yeah.
right, right. And
Right.
I think it's important to take a look at what you make forgiveness mean, and you can
Mm-hmm.
change that meaning, right?
I
You don't
love
have
it.
to,
Mm-hmm.
right? You can say,
That
you know what? I'm going to make forgiveness mean I get to move on and heal.
There you go. I love it. That's perfect. Thank you. So one of the things that I wanted to follow up with you on, because I'd never heard this before, and I'm always looking for new resources for our group, is your husband was financially successful and you lived what most would call a good life. And after your husband and you separated, I assume your attorney filed what's called the status quo.
Yep.
Can you explain what this means and how you struggled to learn to be okay spending money?
Yeah. So luckily I had and still do have a really great attorney. And I didn't know about this, but I went to him with a lot of fear and saying, like, I don't have money. He controls everything, blah, blah, blah. And so he immediately, and I don't know how this is in every state. And obviously I'm not an attorney, but for my particular state, there's something called status quo. So I'd encourage you to ask your attorney if you are going to go through a divorce and you're in a similar situation to be on status quo. All that means is everything stays the same as that what it always was. So meaning financially. So like if you were able to have access to the money and use the cards or buy yourself groceries or that's if you had joint money basically that you still have access to that even during the separation, right? Because what happens is a lot of times these abusers will cut you off as soon as you file for separation. And then you're like,
Exactly.
I have no money, they won't pay me. And then you got to jump through all these hoops through court to try to file motions to get them to pay you, to get money out of the bank accounts and stuff like that. So right out of the gate, my attorney filed that with his attorney and said, we need her on status quo. She doesn't have a job. So she needs access to be able to buy things. She needs to be
Yeah,
able to
yeah.
put gas in the car. She needs to be able to buy food, right? So
Mhm.
I don't know if that is an option for every state, but for me it was.
Yeah, I don't think it is. It is something I've done a little bit of research on, and I'm trying to find an attorney that can explain it to me because I know of a woman in California who was shut down for like 3 months until they finally got something passed and she was able to get access to the funds. And it was a similar situation. It wasn't that there was no money, like in my case, there was no money, but
Right.
that's not always the case. And if you have been financially abused or in the way that he's restricted your earning potential, then you quite possibly could be stuck. And it is one of the reasons why it's so hard for women to leave. And that's why I wanted to bring it up, is
Yeah.
because it is an important piece that women need to know about if they're looking to file and they have no resources. Because if you get into court and you have no resources, he's going to drag it out to make it miserable for you most of the time.
And I'm sorry, I missed the second part of your question.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I put those two
That's
together.
okay.
So what happened after was you were on the status quo and he started spending a lot of money
Oh yeah.
and just went crazy. It wasn't like he kept spending at the level you were spending at, which is my understanding of what the real definition of status quo is that,
Right.
this is where you were each, living prior. Maybe it's a little bit higher because you have separate living situations or something, but all of a sudden he's spending up here
Yeah,
and you're still down here pinching pennies because you've been so ingrained to do that. So you really
exactly.
struggled to learn how to be okay spending money. And
Yeah.
what helped you to overcome that kind of, because that's part of that coercion, right?
Yeah.
He's beat you down, he's undermined your self-esteem, he's made you feel worthless, and you're like going to Goodwill to buy clothes when
Yeah.
there's plenty of money. So how
Right.
did you overcome that and learn that spending within your means, obviously, is
Yeah.
okay?
Well, I think this answer is twofold. And when you read my book and you've read it, because he was, and I think a lot of times in divorce situations, especially when you've got somebody who is very self-centered, they're going to do whatever they can do to try to get whatever they want. Right. And he thought his perception was that I was taking all his money away from him in the divorce. Like it wasn't even I was taking my half. It was I was taking his money, right?
Of course.
So he was
It's all
doing
about
things.
him.
Yeah. So he was doing things throughout the process that were to um allow him to have more of that money. Like there were things I didn't even write in the book that were happening, like where he was paying his mom and paying his sister-in-law to clean and to cook and to watch the kids, which had never happened before, right?
Right.
Which I knew he would write them checks. I could see the checks go through our bank account and I knew what was happening. I knew they were just going to funnel that money right back to him, right?
Right.
So, but I
Mhm.
wouldn't have access to that money because he was using it up. Right.
Right.
And then eventually would get checks back from them. So there's lots of little sneaky ways that he would try to do that. And part of how in my book, this was during the separation, when I noticed that he was doing those things, it was angering me. I was very, very angry. So I was just like, screw you, buddy. I'm just going to go on a shopping spree. I'm just going to buy whatever, right? Because you're getting LASIK eye surgery and spending $4,000 on that, and then claiming it's going through your HSA account where it really wasn't, and you were just going to get that money right back. And so there was lots of things that were fueling me that action actually helped me. Like that, taking those action steps to buy something really, really expensive that was going to really make him mad. Like I knew where to hurt him. It was in the pocketbook, right?
Right. Exactly.
So that's part of my book. No, I'm not condoning that behavior. I'm not saying that you should do that. I'm
Right.
like, if you know Christine Lucan, she would say revenge spending is not a good thing, right? Like,
Right.
and that's what I
Right.
did. But in that moment, I needed it, right? I needed that for myself. But
Right.
ultimately, I did struggle for even after the divorce, right? For a long time with being able to feel confident in my abilities to manage money, for my ability to spend money without feeling guilty about it, that I deserve to have certain things. And so what I had to do was actually truly, and this is based on the work that I do with my clients, is reprogram the beliefs that were limiting
Mhm.
me and making me believe all these things that were just untrue, that were creating this anxiety. I mean, I almost had a panic attack in the parking lot of the grocery store 2 years after the divorce because I bought like $300 worth of groceries. And I
Right.
didn't know why I was about to have a panic attack, but it was the first time I ever spent that much money in a grocery order. And
Right.
so
Which
then
is
I knew,
ridiculous for a family of 4 or 5.
right,
That, yeah, that's
right. So
like
I
the normal
knew,
amount, probably.
yeah.
Yeah.
But like, I
Yeah.
was like, this is ridiculous. I shouldn't be having these
Mhm.
leftover anxiety attacks and things. I'm not even with this person anymore. So I had to
I know.
reprogram my mind. I literally had to reprogram my mind so that I didn't have to experience the
Yeah.
same stuff that I experienced in the relationship.
Now that's really well said. We talk a lot about mindset and skill set. And of course, I'm stronger on the skill set training because I'm not a trained coach like you are, but I encourage women to look at the skill set and the mindset side. And the mindset can be things like that are deep in your psyche that need to be unpacked and
Yes.
healed so that you can move forward. But I also want to comment on your comment about anger
Mhm.
because, okay, revenge spending, I agree with Christine, probably not the best plan. But I think anger can be good
I do
in
too.
some cases in moderation, especially if you were pushed down to the point where you weren't allowed to be angry
Right.
or it just, like it was an ugly angry. I think an angry can be motivational. And I
100%.
think and I think that's when it's healthy, and especially coming out of a divorce and an abusive situation where you are angry, you
Yeah.
are pissed off, and you've probably been told to shut up,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that channeling it appropriately, maybe not spending, maybe go to the gym,
Yeah. Yeah.
take a boxing class would be my suggestion, but
Right.
learn how to express that anger because it is an emotion that's healthy if it's directed appropriately, if I can say
I
that.
yeah, I 100% agree. And I think, I talk to my clients about that all the time because anger is one of those emotions that sometimes you don't want to let go of, and sometimes it helps you. And especially as women, we're taught that it's bad to be angry, or you should be calm, or you don't you shouldn't act like that, or whatever. So
Yeah.
I agree with what you're saying about finding a way to channel it in the best appropriate way for you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So just a couple quick wrap up questions. What would you recommend for women who have been financially abused and are working on financial recovery?
So there's definitely things that you can do when you're struggling with this, because financial abuse can be different. It can be like in my case where I believed I was going to be poor and destitute and live under a bridge and couldn't spend money and would feel guilty about spending money, right? So there's that aspect. And then there's another aspect where you might have a totally different type of experience. Like maybe your abuser was draining you of money. Maybe you were the one that had the money. Maybe
Right.
they were
Right.
making you feel bad for not giving them money or paying their bills, or they were putting you in debt, right? So you might have fears about trusting other people with money, or your ability to handle the things when, there's a big expense or something like that. So really, depending on your specific situation, I think the number one thing that you would definitely want to do is figure out what it is that is limiting you when it comes to your financial abuse situation. So is it this or is it that? Are you afraid to spend money, or do you not feel like that you can even save money? I had one person come to me and tell me that as soon as they got their paycheck, they didn't want to have the money. They wanted to spend it immediately because
Mhm.
they were afraid to have the money, because they were
Yeah.
afraid their abuser was going to take it from them, right?
Mm,
So financial
interesting.
abuse
Yeah.
can be in lots and lots of different ways, but you know that it's not good for you, and you know it's harming you, if it's causing you to feel icky inside, if there's anxiety, worry, guilt, or any kind of emotion. And so I would reach out to a professional. I would talk to somebody who is skilled in that, like Christine Lucan. She helped me. Like, she's the one who helped me with this in the beginning. And she works with mindset too, and starting to challenge the things that you've always thought, starting to actually think of other possibilities, right? Is it possible that I actually can manage money? Is it possible that I actually am better at math than I think that I am? Right? We got to start challenging these narratives. And I think
For
that's a
sure.
really good starting point. Get a professional and start challenging those old stories.
I love that. Thank you so much. That's really, really well said. So tell us about how we can reach you and what's going on. What are you looking forward to in your business?
Great. So, yeah, I'd love to connect with anybody who's interested in learning more about rapid reprogramming, the subconscious mind. I love talking about it. Um, you can find me on Instagram at Allison K. Dagney. You can find me on Facebook, same place, Allison K. Dagney. I also have a podcast that's really, really helpful, and I have an episode on financial abuse out there for that as well. And I can give you the link to that podcast so that you can share it
Yeah.
with everyone. But it's pretty popular because I really do take a different approach to healing that gets people results. So please reach out to me. You can also find my book on Amazon in Audible, or ebook, or paperback as well.
And again, the title is When Tears Leave Scars, and
Ma'am.
under the name Allison K. Dagney. So Allison, I really just appreciate you so much being here today for our audience. I think that your experience with emotional abuse by a narcissist just comes at such a timely point for so many people who are like we were, didn't really recognize the abuse that we were experiencing until later. And hopefully we can bring that to the forefront for some people, and the correlation of how frequently financial abuse is seen with other kinds of abuse, which is really pretty much all the time. So thank you again for being here. I really appreciate your time. I'm Sherry Lutz Harrington with Women Surviving Financial Abuse and Strong Women Thriving.
Thank you.